Just-in-time requirement engineering. So what is requirement engineering all about? It is about defining, documenting, and managing the requirements of a system. A good agile practice for defining of the requirements is along the lines of what we call lean UX, which is a cross-functional collaboration between designers, developers, product owner, and other stakeholders. With this approach, we work in iteration, which fits well into the sprints in Scrum. Instead of creating all the requirements in a big design up front, they are continuously discovered through collaboration and experiments. For managing of the requirements, we have the product backlog in Scrum. The product backlog is an emergent ordered list and always reflecting our best understanding in what is needed to be completed to reach the product goal. Now, for me, having about 50 product backlog items in a product backlog is a good number, which works for me pretty well. Now, after having looked into defining and managing in requirements engineering, documentation needs more attention. What is documentation all about in requirements engineering? It is about codification of knowledge. What does this mean? Essentially, we make a brain dump of our knowledge onto paper so that we can import that understanding back into our brains by reading that document at a later time. It's like a time shift of understanding. In an ideal world, there would be no loss of information. In reality, it sucks. If we are good in writing, we bring about 30% of our knowledge on paper. If we are good in reading, we get about 80% back from what we read. As you can see, this is a very lossy process. And on top of that, there's another problem. Our language is not context-free. There is always room for interpretation, as there is always context. Now close your eyes and imagine a tree. What kind of tree are you seeing? For me, it's a big, huge oak tree, which was growing in the street I was living. What was your tree? Now, you always read your requirements from the perspective of your personal narrative, and this leads to a different understanding. Instead of trying to add more and more layers of formalism to our notation language, how about talking to each other? Increase the levels of interaction and communication, as described by Dave Snowden and Mary Boone in their famous Harvard Business Review paper about complexity, a leader's framework for decision-making. For me, Agile is just-in-time requirement engineering. No big design up front, more communication than documentation, and a dynamic emergent product backlog. We want iterative and incremental product development sprint after sprint with vertical slices. In case you have a yes but thought about required documentation, don't worry. If they are required, well then put them in your definition of done. And your professional developers will make sure that those documents are up to date next to your working product.